regular meeting. Unfortunately, we were not able to do that. And we waited in thinking maybe we could get started in January. And ultimately, in order to get the process at least started, we are doing this electronically. So it looks like so far everybody seems to be logged in. And let me just go over a few things associated with this electronic process, this virtual meeting process. So a few housekeeping things here. First of all, a reminder that the meeting is being video recorded, and this will be posted on the county website. So we'll also send a link around when that is available, and a link to the recording will also be posted on the county webpage dedicated to this task force. So let me go over how you can, if you haven't figured it out, how you can unmute yourself, and also how you can see all the different participants in the process. So if you take your mouse and move it around over the middle of the screen, you'll see 7 circles pop up. The circle to the far left is the mute button. So whenever you want to speak, and I'm not saying you need to do that right now, but you can click on that. It turns red when it's mute, and then it's black whenever you're unmuted. Similarly, that's the symbol right next to that is for video. So don't feel like you have to be on video all the time, but you're welcome to keep that going as much as you'd like. If you keep going, the button in the middle is particularly important for a couple of reasons. It looks like a person maybe carrying 3 plates. That is actually the participant button. So if you click on that, it turns blue, and on the right side of your screen will come up a list of all the folks that are participating in the call. So that's really helpful. You can see who else is online. And there's one other thing that's really helpful. If you do that and you see the list of participants, and right now we're up to 68, we have 31 panelists. At the bottom right of your screen, you'll see a couple of little symbols, including an exclamation point, a little feedback symbol, and most importantly, there's a little raise hand. So at any point in the process, and one of us will have to be looking, but feel free to raise your hand in order to be called on. Also, for attendees that are watching this process, whenever I open it up to anybody to ask a question or make a comment, that's how you can participate, is use the little raise hand icon, and then you'll be unmuted basically one at a time in order to ask your question or make your comment. So that's how that works. We also I want to also just note another circle right next to the middle one looks like a little balloon. That is the chat function. So if you click on that, that allows you to send a chat message to, if you're a panelist, to other panelists. And what we really want to encourage folks to do, if they're running into some problems technically, and hopefully it's not so bad that they can't find this, but what we want you to do is send a chat message to Jose Belcid, and Jose is my land use aide in the Hunter Mill District office, and Jose can get back to you with any hopefully technical fixes. We also have some folks from the Department of Information Technology, the county's DIT, who are attending and can help us if we really get into a pickle. And I'll introduce a couple more folks in a few minutes. Let me just go through a couple more housekeeping issues. So if you're hearing impaired, you can call TTY 711 and use the phone number and access code that's provided on the Hunter Mill District Land Use and Zoning webpage. So you would go to fairfaxcounty.gov and search for Hunter Mill District Land Use and Zoning. So thanks everybody again for your patience as we get through the technical part of this process. The really interesting thing to me is after we get through this pandemic, it'll be interesting. I think there's some opportunities for us to continue to use some of this technology that we're using now to expand the ability for people to participate in the process. And so I'm hopeful that even though right now this seems pretty weird and a lot of us are adjusting to this, I look forward to being able to continue to use some of this technology at least going into the future. So let me just address a few things about the process that are non-technical, that are more land use related. So I should have said this right at the beginning, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Walter Alcorn. I'm the new Hunter Mill District Supervisor. And for purposes of this task force, I will be chairing this task force, which I believe is a first. I don't believe Fairfax County has had any other district supervisors chair a comprehensive plan task force like this. But to me, this is very important. This is a very important issue, not only for Reston, but for all of Hunter Mill District and for Fairfax County. So there's really no more important way for me to spend my time than to be participating and frankly hearing from you and understanding all the different issues that are raised here and discussed, and to have that background moving forward to when this ultimately changes coming out of this task force will ultimately go to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors on which I serve. So that's a little different, as the district supervisor is chairing this effort. Second, we're going to work towards a schedule that respects everybody's time. So at the beginning of each meeting, I'm going to announce a target end time for the meeting, and that's what we're going to work to. So we're not going to be having meetings that are going to be going to 11 at midnight and later. We're not going to do that. So when there are issues that are not completed, then we will move them to the next meeting. And I'll just announce right now that the meeting end time that we're looking at for tonight is 9 p.m. So it's now 7:11. That gives us plenty of time to get through the agenda, I think, and things that we don't get to, we'll put on the next meeting agenda. Third, and this is not completely unusual, but I'm going to chair this task force with the goal of getting to consensus. And the idea here is not everyone will get all they want, nor will anyone probably be completely happy with all the outcomes, but I'm going to be pushing folks to try to work through issues and look for resolution. So as I mentioned, this process will go through likely the coming year. This is a somewhat aggressive timetable. We're talking about scheduling meetings roughly every other week for approximately 1 year. And after this task force puts forward a recommendation, then it will go to the Planning Commission, Fairfax County Planning Commission. And let me see if he's on the phone. Is John Carter, our Planning Commissioner, I shouldn't say on the phone, is he online on this event? John, are you there? Yes, I see John. John, say hello to folks.
Hello, I'm John Carter. Hi, Walter.
Thank you, John. So John is the Hunter Mill representative on the County Planning Commission. So after the task force, it goes and lands in John's lap. And then after the Planning Commission makes its recommendation, changes to the county's comprehensive plan will go to the Board of Supervisors. So in a nutshell, that is an abbreviated background on the technical issues in terms of the platform that we're using, and also some of the important process and procedural things that we will do. So at this point, what I want to do is go around and introduce, have everybody introduce themselves. And I actually have the handy dandy list of, because I've clicked on my participant button, so I know who is at the top, and we can work our way down so we don't all try to speak at once. Now, when you get called on to speak, unmute yourself if you can. And remember, that's the button to the far left that looks like the microphone. So actually, Lisa Connors in my office is helping with this. And Lisa, I'm going to have you introduce yourself first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Connors. I'm Supervisor Alcorn's Communications Director.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Let's go next to Jose.
Hi, everybody. It's Jose. Hopefully you guys can see my video now. The land use aid, you guys are all nice to me.
Thank you, Jose. All right, now we'll start into task force members. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to work through the list of panelists. Most of you are regular task force members. Some of you may be alternates, but all of you that are either a task force member or an alternate are given panelists, I guess, status for purposes of this platform. So if you want to follow along and see where you might come up, it looks like it's going in alphabetical order and by first name. At least that's the list that I'm looking at. So Alvarez, I'm gonna call on you first. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be on it. Alvarez Lassane. I've been in Reston since 77 August in the uplands and been in love with it. Bob Simon's 10 rules and every experience we've had here in Reston, my wife and 9 children have been outstanding. And again, it's an honor to be a part of this plan.
Thank you, Alvarez. Next, actually, we have DIT Amante. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amante. I'm representing the Department of Information Technology. I'm here to just listen in and see if you have any technical issues that I can assist with.
Thank you, Amante. And next is Bill. Bill, can you unmute yourself?
Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. Yeah, of course, right. You're under video. So, yeah, Bill Keefe. Sorry about that, Bill.
No, Bill Penniman is actually the RCC representative, Walter, and I'm the alternate. So maybe we ought to hear from Bill Penniman first.
Let's do that. Bill, not William, but Bill Penniman.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Hi. So this is Bill, I'm a 16-year resident of Reston. I'm on the Reston Community Center Board of Governors. I was on the Master Plan Task Force and also on the P&Z Committee. So these are all interesting issues near and dear to my heart.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bill. Bruce, I believe you're next. And I think we only have one Bruce on this panel. Bruce, be sure when you unmute your WebEx, be sure you also unmute your computer. I've done that before. Bruce? All right, we're going to come back to Bruce. Sorry about that technical problem, but we'll come back to you. And if you do get unmuted, go ahead and pipe up at some point. Okay, next, Burton Griffith.
Burton Griffith. I've lived in Reston since 2007. Nice to see you all and looking forward to working with you over the next year or so.
Wonderful. Thank you, Burton. Welcome. All right. Now we have a couple of Charles. Charles Colby.
Hello. Charles Colby, representing Hunter's Green Cluster, and looking forward to this.
Welcome. Now we have Charles Kapoor.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Charles Kapoor. I am the current president and CEO of the Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce. I've been working in Reston for about 10 years. Prior to joining the chamber as CEO, I was a community banker here in the area.
Wonderful. Thank you for participating in this, Charles. Chris Caperton. Chris, you want to introduce yourself, and then we're going to come back to you in a few minutes.
Thank you, Supervisor. Chris Caperton, Deputy Director in the Department of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Chris. Next, David Gill.
Yes, my name is David Gill. I'm actually the MVBIA representative on this task force, and I have previously served on the previous iteration of the Reston Task Force and been a resident here in the South Lake School Pyramid since 2008.
Great. And David, tell us, for those of us that don't know, what does NVBIA stand for?
Great question. Northern Virginia Building Industry Association. It's the trade association that represents the home builders.
Great. Thank you very much. David Vinnell.
Good evening. This is David Vinnell. I'm a member of the P&Z. I've been a member since probably the late 90s. Served a stint as the chairman there, and I worked on the last master plan task force. And I'm looking forward to the next year of developing, new procedures for the county, for the Mahoney Mill.
Thank you, David. Appreciate all your service. Gary Maupin. Gary's next.
Hi, Gary Maupin. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I live in Reston Town Center. It's my second high-rise building in Reston Town Center. I'm really looking forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Gary. Jason Beskey.
Hello, Jason Beskey here. I serve on the design review board and a planner and urban designer in my daily life. Looking forward to this. I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Juszczuk.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Juszczuk, and I have been in Reston since 2014, and I'm ready to get started. Master plan out and highlighted and tabbed. So if you don't know me well, you will come to learn I'm a detailed person.
Jennifer, you're in the right place as a detailed person. So thank you. It's very good. John Carter, you've already introduced yourself. Welcome, John, Hunter Mill Planning Commissioner. John Mooney. John, is your system working right?
Yes, I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, we all can.
Good evening, Walter. Good evening, everyone. I'm a member of the Reston Association Board of Directors, have been since 2017. And through my 27 years in local government management experience, I'm very concerned about land use matters, and so very happy to be serving and representing RA on this task force.
Thank you, John. Larry.
Hello, Larry Butler, Chief Operating Officer for Reston Association. I am the alternate for when John can't show up, I guess. And I've been working for RA since 1982.
Larry, I like the facial hair. It's good.
I see it on a lot of people. Except you, Walter.
Yeah, you don't want to know. Thank you, Larry.
My pleasure.
Lori?
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a issue. I can't get my camera working, so I apologize.
It's okay.
Just want to say thank you, Walter, for arranging this. It's quite an amazing feat. And I am a new resident to Reston of about almost 3 years now, so seasoned. And love walking the trails and love being a part of it. And I'm an alternate with Michelle Kimmel and Jennifer. So you'll at least see one of us at each meeting. And I will get my camera fixed so you will see me as well.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you, Lori, for participating. Next is Lynn Molston. Lynn, go ahead and unmute yourself and see how to do that. There you go.
Okay. I just wanted to say how excited I am and honored to be selected to serve on this task force. And for the other folks that are on the call, I'm a 35-year Reston resident, and I do have a very keen appreciation for Reston's founding principles. And I am serving as vice president of the Reston Citizens Association. I am the main contact. Dennis Hayes, who is the president, is our alternate. But I also serve on the Coalition for a Planned Reston, and also I'm serving as chair of the North Course for Rescue Reston. So I used to coach the girls golf team at South Lakes High School. So I am very keen on golf in Reston, and I'm also an avid environmentalist. So I'm very, as you all will learn, I'm very interested in protecting Reston's precious open space and the wildlife habitat that our golf courses offer.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Appreciate you doing this. Next, and Mark, I'm afraid your name may be a little misspelled, but Mark Looney, welcome.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was misspelled. I'm Mark Looney. I'm a land use and zoning attorney with the law firm of Cooley. I sat on the prior Reston Master Plan Task Force and represent property owners and developers who want to build stuff in the community.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for being part of this process. Mike is next. Palacios. You want to introduce yourself, Mike?
Hi, I'm Mike Palacios. I'm Director of DIT Networking, here to support you and your team, Mr. Alcorn.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that. Hopefully we won't have to be calling on you very much. So far, so good. Michelle Kimmel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Kimmel, and I've been in Reston for almost 5 years now, and I'm very happy to join everyone and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. Mike Jennings.
Hello, everyone. Mike Jennings. I'm 34 years in Reston. I own a small business in Reston. It's been here for 17 years. I'm an alternate representing the Reston Chamber, and I'm also on the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee for probably the last 7 or 8 years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Myra Callahan.
Did it work?
There you are.
Oh.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Myra Callahan. I'm the alternate to Bruce Ramo, who's representing Reclaim Reston. I've been in and out of Reston since about I think it was 1995. I'm really excited to be working on or sitting on this group as an alternate. I very much am like Jennifer with highlights and have the comprehensive plan. I pretty much have read it back and forth many times. And one thing I would recommend to everybody during this COVID lockdown is walking. I have been on almost every RA path and FCPA trail in the area. I go out almost every day, and it really has been, it's been almost like I'd say like a blessing, but it's been really interesting to get out with my children and walk around and see things I've never seen before. So really, it's there is an upside to it.
Thank you very much, Myra. Appreciate you being part of this process. And good tip on the walking. I totally agree. Next, my favorite name in the list, Reston Bell. Welcome. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself. There. Ooh, almost. There. Uh-oh, there may be some technical problems. Wait, there you go. That works.
Okay, it held. I hit it and it just bounced back. Good evening, everyone. As my name suggests, I was born and raised here in Reston, and my family's been here at this point for almost 40 years. I am from the north side of Reston. We've lived off of North Shore in some way, shape, or form my whole life, and I am back again, living down near Tall Oaks. So went to South Lakes, graduated from there, but started at Lake Ann Elementary School. So I would say I am very invested. I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Simon a number of times. As you know, with my name, everyone thought that was like, you know, fun. So I really respected his vision and what he was attempting to do in this space. So I would like to help preserve that as much as possible, but also finding ways to keep us relevant for people who are newer to the area. So, you know, really honored and consider it a privilege to be on the board and looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reston. Thanks for participating in this.
Absolutely.
Rob Whitman is next.
My name's Rob Whitman, and I am a representative from the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. I'm a real estate broker. I own a real estate brokerage in Reston, and I live in Reston, so it seemed like a natural fit. So I'll be here to hopefully help from the realtor side.
Thank you, Rob. Next, Sarah Godfrey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Godfrey. I'm the community engagement specialist with the Department of Planning and Development. So happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, Sarah. And Shane Murphy. Shane, you're muted.
Same thing, it bounced back. Shane Murphy, I'm a land use attorney with Reed Smith, and I'm an alternate representing the Northern Virginia Building Industry Association.
Great, thank you, Shane. St. Clair Williams.
Good evening, everyone. I'm St. Clair Williams. I'm a senior planner in the Urban Center section of the Department of Planning and Development, and I'm part of the staff team that'll be working on this study.
Thank you, St. Clair. Appreciate all your help with this. We're all going to get to know you pretty well over the next year. And last, but definitely not least, Tammy Petrine.
Well, I am having trouble also with video, but I am so excited to say hello to many old friends and hopefully meet some new friends. My family and I have lived in and loved Reston for 44 years. And I'm heavily involved in being sure we keep what's wonderful and beautiful. I'm on the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee, a chair of Reston 2020, on the leadership team of Coalition for a Planned Reston. Thank you all. Thank you, Walter, for forming this group.
Well, thank you, Tammy. Appreciate all the work that you're doing for the community. Now, we do have one more on the list, but Bill Penniman's already spoken and introduced himself. Before I turn it over to Chris Caperton with the Department of Planning and Development, I do want to just note we also have 46 attendees. These are folks, if you can imagine, these are folks in the audience. And as I said earlier, what we're going to do is later in the meeting, towards the end of the agenda, I'm going to ask if any attendees have comments or questions. And then at that point, they'll be able to use the little raise hand symbol and then we will unmute folks for questions or comments at the end. So I will open up amongst the task force members for questions and comments, but let's first have a presentation from the Department of Planning and Development to give some background, some important background about the context of the process that we're working through right here. And also we'll provide an opportunity for anybody to ask questions after Chris gets through his presentation. So Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Actually, I'm not sure if it's going to be your presentation or St. Clair's, but your call.
Thank you, Supervisor. Actually, it will be St. Clair doing the presentation. So I certainly going to take the opportunity to talk a little bit during that presentation. So as you mentioned, as I mentioned, I'm Chris Caperton. I'm the Deputy Director in the Department of Planning and Development. Barbara Byron, who's on the call tonight with us, is the Director of that department. And I should also mention that Deputy County Executive Rachel Flynn is also joining us on the call this evening. St. Clair and Sarah have made introductions, but the three of us represent the key points of contact with staff in the Department of Planning and Development, and St. Clair will serve as a project manager. I'm helping to coordinate, and Sarah, as she mentioned, is a community engagement specialist. And she's obviously working closely with Lisa Connors and the Hunter Mill staff to make sure that information is pushed out in locations where people can find it, and that citizens who are interested in the project and the process can also navigate and find information about our process. So the authorization has 9 different topics, and as you can imagine, that would result in having quite a large staff involved. And indeed, if you were to, this is for task force members, if you go to the bottom of the participants page and view all the attendees, you'll see quite a few people that include county staff members that are joining us on the call tonight. I'm not going to make them introduce themselves. In fact, I'm not even going to try to go through all the names, but let me just mention real quickly the departments that are represented on this call to give you a sense of sort of the scale and interest and sort of the wide breadth of topics that this authorization will cover. So I mentioned the Department of Planning and Development, and that includes our zoning divisions as well. We're joined by the Department of Economic Initiatives, the Department of Health, Neighborhood and Community Services, Capital Facilities and Public Works, our County Park Authority, FCDOT, the Office of Strategy Management for Health and Human Services, and our Department of Housing and Community Development. And I may have missed a department or two, but as you can see, we've got a wide range of interest and folks that are plugged in. We don't have presentations from these groups. We're really here to listen and take in and absorb what the task force has to say about the authorization. We've gotten some early instruction from our supervisor and his office as well. So we look forward to working with the task force. We look forward to getting to know you and know you better. Some of you we have worked with in a professional setting, and so others I know that we've crossed paths in the development of the Reston design guidelines and other actions that have taken place in Reston. So we're excited. We're glad to jump into this brave new world of virtual meetings and try to figure it out with the rest of you. And but we want to be resources for the task force and for the citizens that are interested in this process as we move forward. I'm going to let St. Clair go through about 6 slides that talk about the comprehensive plan, and I'm going to close it up with a few slides about Reston and some contact information. Thanks, St. Clair. And you're muted.
No.
St. Clair, can you unmute?
Okay, so now we should be good. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so from the introductions, it sounds like most of the task force members are well versed with the comprehensive plan, but for those who may not be, and for any attendees who may not be, we just wanted to give a brief overview of the comprehensive plan and some info about the plan amendment process. So the Code of Virginia requires that every locality within the state have a comprehensive plan. And comprehensive plans generally are a long-term vision for land development and preservation of resources for a locality. Plan amendments usually cover a 20-year or more period and include a set of policies and recommendations to achieve the plan's visions and goals. The state code also requires that localities planning commission review the comprehensive plan at least once every 5 years to ensure recommendations promote orderly development and growth. So the comprehensive plan is the primary resource that staff, the board of supervisors, and the planning commission and other decision makers use for evaluating land use applications and making policy decisions about the county's built and natural environments. The comprehensive plan is a community's land use vision, priorities, and goals. It ideally represents the full spectrum of the community, including young and old, renters and homeowners, minority communities, and all income ranges. The comprehensive plan sets forth areas for the county that are recommended for more development or for retention of their existing uses and character, or changes in land use. The plan includes land use recommendations such as mixed use, residential or retail, the amount of development, and the character of development. It also includes design details such as recommended building heights, recommended open space networks, and street networks. The comprehensive plan includes a policy plan and 4 area plan volumes. The policy plan is the countywide guidance and includes 11 elements, which include land use, transportation, environments, public facilities, parks, and recreation, among others. Each element is a series of board-adopted strategies and address a variety of considerations, such as green building policies and water and air quality considerations to promote environmental sustainability. Ensuring developments include sidewalks, bicycle facilities, or pedestrian access to transit, and policies on public park space and recreational facilities like fields and playgrounds to support current and future populations. Again, the comprehensive plan also includes 4 area plans. The county is divided into 4 areas, areas 1 through 4. And then within the areas, you have planning districts. In this case, this study is looking at the Reston area, which is located within the Upper Potomac Planning District. The comprehensive plan is a living document which can be amended. The Board of Supervisors authorizes staff to conduct studies and consider proposed amendments, which allows us to consider land uses that are different than what the current plan recommends. Getting community opinions and ideas during a planning study is very important, especially early on in the process. While there may not always be agreement, generally there is a level of respect and understanding if the community feels the process was transparent, communication was clear, and staff was responsible. Many homeowners associations, civic associations, and interest groups like land use committee have likely committees, and they're often included in the process. During the process, staff makes recommendations about a study, answers questions, and listens to the group. In some studies, anyone from the public is invited to propose a land use change within certain parameters. For larger scale amendments or countywide studies, it is typical to have a task force, as we have here, generally comprised of local community members and property owners. Let's say at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Claire, for the overview of the comp plan. The supervisor asked that we just drop in a couple of slides just sort of showing the scale of development in Reston, and specifically these 2 slides have to do with the TSA area, which, as anyone living out there in Reston would know, that this is a major driver of both economic and population growth in Reston. So, as you can see, through 2019 to the end of the year, a little over 14 million square feet of commercial development approved, 13.5 million square feet of residential development, and about $145 million towards public infrastructure to include road funds, athletic fields, and schools. And as of the end of 2019, early 2020, we had 12 major rezoning applications in process, which equated to about 158 acres of the TSA, 4.5 million square feet of commercial development, and almost 10 million square feet of residential development. As I mentioned, the geography of our particular project is the entirety of Reston, although some elements of the authorization do call out the TSA. And here specifically, drilling down a little bit, are some of the most recently approved developments. And although the graphics are rather small and hard to read if you're not familiar with them, I think they do give you a sense of scale as to the type of development that we are seeing in the TSA, multi-use type of development above commercial and residential uses, oftentimes in mixed development proposals. That's a quick overview of the comp plan and sort of what's happening on the ground in the TSA areas. We also have a couple of slides that just have basic contact information for the task force. And again, as the supervisor mentioned, this presentation will be put up on YouTube, and we will also make this presentation available on our website. We're working with Hunter Mill to develop a robust website for use by task force members, as well as for citizens to come and learn about the project. So this particular presentation that you've seen tonight will be posted. So you see telephone numbers, contact emails, including a Department of Planning and Development Urban Centers email that can be used specifically for questions about the Reston project as we move forward. And then we'll also have another page that has resource links. And obviously this is a list that will grow, but the second bullet is the Reston Study Area plan amendment page on the DPD website, and it will also link to our Urban Center section website, where we'll have additional information about the Reston project, always in coordination with the Hunter Mill District's land use and zoning page as well. We didn't want to be long-winded tonight, so that's the presentation. Tried to open it up for questions. Let me just turn it back over to Supervisor Alcorn.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Just a couple of questions before I open it up to any questions from task force members or alternates. First of all, St. Clair, what's your dog's name? I think we have a new participant.
Yeah, I apologize. That's Lincoln. He was perfectly quiet until I started speaking.
Lincoln sounds like a good dog. So this is for Chris or St. Clair. Just some of the folks I think participating in this process might be new to how land use is done in Virginia. Can you just very quickly walk through what's the difference between the comprehensive plan and zoning?
And yeah, I can handle that question. So like I mentioned, the comprehensive plan is the vision for development in the county. It's the guide over a 20-year or more period. Zoning or the zoning ordinance is the tool that is used to implement that vision. So that is how you really get that vision to come into form, is through zoning and the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, St. Clair. And I'll make one note that I think this has made things a little bit more complicated for us that live in Reston. The history of Reston did not grow out of the comprehensive plan. Reston was created by basically a master plan that was created in the early 60s. And for many, many years, until about 5 or 6 years ago, there was really a very, very short section of the comprehensive plan on Reston. Basically, it was the Reston master plan was considered, but that was the guidance. So in many ways, in the last 5 or 6 years, Reston, from a process standpoint, has moved from having that master plan be the primary guide for development in Reston. And now that we're into redevelopment, and now that the comprehensive plan has been the guide for looking at all rezoning applications in Reston for the last few years. We're now, I think, from a process standpoint, more aligned with the rest of Fairfax County. St. Clair, would you agree with that, or did I miss something?
I would agree with that.
So it does make it, and I would point out one other thing, in this process, the PRC, which we all know a lot about, is a zoning district. So what we're talking about here is the guide that is above, if you will, the zoning level. So property is typically rezoned to be consistent with what the guide says, what the comprehensive plan says. In this process, we're looking at the comprehensive plan. Now, before I open it up to others for questions, we do have a couple of folks, a couple of task force members that joined. Jan Bradshaw, I think, Jan, could you unmute yourself and just say hello, introduce yourself?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, well, my name is Jan Bradshaw, and I'm currently serving as the chair for the Southgate Community Center Advisory Council. I've been on the council since it was just an idea. It was a pool, and it was very exciting to watch it grow from a pool to the plans to the building to hiring an executive director, and we even came up with the programs of it. So that was seeing things grow and develop, something that I've always been fascinated with. I volunteer on the Hunters Woods Neighborhood Coalition. I'm a member of Leadership Fairfax, and I'm a member of the Hearing Loss Connection, Northern Virginia, on the board there. I work at Reston Community Center, which I love, and I was on that board of governors for 6 years. I served on the Reston Citizens Association board, the Alliance for Clusters and Homeowners, which was called ARCH, the Hunters Woods Village Condominium Association for 23 years, most of that as president. And I was on the Reston Task Force of 2020. So I have to tell you, I'm very excited to see this continuation of actually seeing that and going. My major was sociology, and one of the courses that I developed for the instructor was urban sociology. So this has been very exciting for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
And one more task force member, Bruce. Let me see if this, let's see if we can get it. Okay, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Terrific. Well, thank you for giving me a second chance, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm representing Reclaim Reston. I have been a resident here for 7 years after having lived all over the country. I'm very happy that this is our last stop in a tour of many states. I've been active with Reclaim Reston, CPR, and a member of the DRB, and very happy to be a participant in this activity. And again, Walter, thank you for leading.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate that. And I'm glad the technology works. So now we have proof that for all of our task force members, the technology at least worked the first time. So knock on wood, fingers crossed, we'll keep going. Now I'm going to try to do something. Let's see if this works. If everybody has the participant screen up, what I'm going to do is, I mentioned there's the raise hand feature. Let's try it and see if we can, if anybody wants to ask a question, go ahead and click on the raise. Oh, Len's got a question. So, all right, Len, go right ahead.
Okay. I'm unmuting and I'm turning on my video.
Right,
so, I appreciate the delineation between the comprehensive plan and zoning and, all of these different layers. And it's my understanding that zoning of all of those components, zoning is law. So I would just like to make sure that that assumption on my part is correct.
Yes, that is correct. St. Clair, do you want to hit that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that is correct. So the comprehensive plan is our recommendations, their guidelines. The zoning ordinance is law. That is correct.
Thank you.
And I'll just add something to that. You know, Lynn, it's with law, it does come with some elements that don't exist with the comprehensive plan. I like to say that zoning is a one-way street, that once a property is rezoned, it is extremely rare, if not impossible, to unzone a property. Only if the landowner chooses to change the zoning or ask for a change does that happen. Now, there have been a couple of historic examples, but they're generally decades ago.
And is that called downzoning?
That's one way, yeah. But even on a site-specific, yes, that is called downzoning, absolutely.
Thank you.
And Lynn, after, go ahead and take off your hand raise.
Okay.
Thank you for being the guinea pig.
Lower my hand.
Lower your hand. There we go.
Lower.
Anyone else have a question at this point?
Hey, Walter, it's Mark. I can't see my hand raised anywhere, but
Go ahead, Mark.
to Lynn's point, just to add to that, I think it's important to at least note that a lot of the older parts of Reston were zoned 20, 30, 40 years ago, such that that zoning is still the applicable zoning. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity or the pleasure to participate in it, it's very vague in certain circumstances. And so it ends up, you know, you're to Lynn's point, you're dealing with law that was created 20, 30, 40 years ago that you're now trying to apply to current circumstances. And that's where you sometimes end up with conflicts between what the comprehensive plan might want to see in 2020 versus what the zoning that was adopted in 1967 permits. And that's kind of the rub that's created a few circumstances that have been challenging.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, I think you demonstrated we don't have to use the hand raising all the time. Are there? We'll see if everybody tries to jump in at the same time, we might want to go back to that. But other questions or comments?
I don't know how to raise my hand, so I apologize. This is Lori.
Hey, Lori.
How are you? I'd like to also just mention that, you know, a lot of the zoning that we have right now is also, and all the plans that people are making are made upon a scenario that was all pre-pandemic, and that presumptions of what people would want their life to be like after it may be radically different than what we believe it is today.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We're definitely, I would say, in a time of uncertainty, and I would say probably even more to the point, at least in my mind, is let's see where people choose to live, how they choose to live going forward, how they choose to live, work, and play. And I think as much as anything any of us do, you know, through a process like this, or you know, any regulatory process or planning process, I think ultimately one thing that certainly is in my mind, I don't know how this is going to affect the market for various things. I mean, we're just going to have to see. But it's a good point, Lori.
Mm-hmm. I just one of the participants mentioned the walking trails and how important they've become, and I don't think anybody could have anticipated how important they've become until the pandemic hit, and it was really our only vice or our only opportunity to leave our homes in a safe way. So, just a thought.
Good point. Good point. Other comments or questions? Okay, then let's move on to the next item in the agenda. And some of this we've already covered, but it's a discussion of the task force procedures relative to public participation during the pandemic and afterwards, and accessing meeting materials. So some of this we've already covered, but just to reiterate, we're using this WebEx platform, at least initially, to get the process started for this task force. We've set it up so that task force members and alternates will be able to see each other and participate, not terribly dissimilar to a meeting room in which people sitting around the table. So in addition, we have attendees that are at least analogous to an audience. And as I mentioned, at the end of our agenda, I'll also open up the floor to any attendees that want to ask a question or make a comment. So it's similar to a process in the real world. So we'll be taking questions or comments from the audience at the end. So this is something that we'll have to work our way through. None of us know how long we're going to be in this type of situation where meetings are really not feasible, in-person meetings. But I'm hopeful that over time we'll be able to transition this process, if not 100% to in-person, to perhaps in the meantime some type of hybrid. I see a future, a foreseeable future, when we'll have some people will be comfortable and able to go to meetings, perhaps socially distanced, and others will not. So through this process, I want to make sure that it's open to the point that regardless of where you fall on the virus vulnerability spectrum, that you have the opportunity to participate in this process. Also, in terms of the meeting materials, Lisa, could I call on you to talk a little bit about where those materials are and how folks can find them?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Sarah who can explain about their DPD's webpage.
Great.
Hi, everyone. So we have a page for this study where you will see and be able to find meeting information for upcoming meetings. And then after this meeting, we'll build out a meeting archive where meeting materials, notes, any like presentations or helpful information that was discussed in a meeting will be archived there. And yeah, that place will probably be, your kind of one-stop shop to get the best overview of kind of what's the latest with this process.
And I'll add to that the that link will be on the Hunter Mill District land use and zoning page. So we'll have the meeting, just the next meeting date and all that information there, but that will link directly over to the DPD page.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lisa. I see Tammy Petrine has her hand up. Tammy, did you mean to do that?
Yes. Yes, I did.
All right, good.
Walter, could I ask you a little bit about the scope of this task force and the comp plan? Are we doing the PRC only, or are we doing the transit station areas and the PRC?
The plan as advertised, and I guess it's maybe implicit in the motion that I made at the board, would cover all of Reston. So the part that's covered by PRC zoning and the part that's not. So and this is one of the basically it's the whole Reston plan. I know Jennifer earlier had, looks like, printed out a copy of the plan. So that's basically the document that provides at least the geographic scope.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? And Tammy, thank you for being polite and raising your hand, but I almost didn't see you. Lisa had to text me. Any other questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda? Okay, then let's go on to the goals and intended outcomes of the task force. So now this is not something that I actually teed up. I don't know if DPD has it or not, but I mentioned a motion that I made to initiate this process. It was actually my very first board matter after being sworn into the Board of Supervisors. And I laid out, I believe, 9 points for investigation by this group, and we're going to be talking about the elements in the authorization in just a minute. One of my goals for this process is, you know, from at least my perspective, I feel like there were some elements. There was a tremendous amount done from the earlier plan review and plan development process, and thank you, members of this task force that participated in the earlier task force as well as numerous committees and study efforts both before and since then. But coming out of that process, you know, based on conversations I certainly have had with many folks in the community, I've heard from many of you about some elements that perhaps need a second look or need additional attention. So the goal in my mind of this effort is to see where we are in terms of implementation of the comprehensive plan that was adopted several years ago, 5-6 years ago, and then also to see what the approach should be for the comprehensive plan going forward. What I hope to see out of this process is a clear identification of issues and then a resolution of issues that are accepted as proper issues for the comprehensive plan. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that we're going to be working through a number of issues relating to how development relates to infrastructure. We're going to be looking at Reston's population. You know, what should the goal be for Reston's population going into the future? And also, we're going to be looking at a number of design-related issues in terms of how design should fit into Reston as an existing community. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work through this process as a group, and where there are disagreements, where there are issues that can become contentious, that we'll all work in good faith to try to find a way to move forward, and all in the interest of making Reston a great place to live, work, and play, which I think is a goal that we all share. So that is, at a high level, what I would like to see come out of this. Now, it is also, we do have a number of elements in the authorization, and St. Clair, are you going to be walking through those, and then we'll have a discussion of those?
I hadn't planned to, but I can pull them up, and I'll work on pulling them up, and we can just discuss them as we go.
Okay, while you're pulling them up, does anyone have any questions or comments on goals and outcomes of this task force? Anybody want to go into more detail or have any questions right off the top of your head on that? I see two hands up. Gary, why don't you go first, and then and then David. Gary, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sorry, I didn't unmute.
Okay.
I heard you just reference 9 goals, and I kind of remember that from the past, but I thought I just heard you list just a few of those goals. I might have missed some.
No, when St. Clair brings up that, and that's my fault. I should have had those up and ready to go. But when he brings those up, then we'll walk through the different elements. And one of the things, frankly, I want to do tonight is excellent. There we go. Is to walk through and basically confirm that these are worth looking into. You know, do some of them maybe need tweaking a little bit? And yeah, we'll walk through those in just a minute. David Vanel, I think you had a question as well.
Sir, I've got a kind of wondering, we're going to cover a tremendous amount of ground in this next year, as everybody can see from that list of tasks and focus points. Are you intending to provide chunks of this to the citizenry? Are you intending to give us an opportunity to go out and seek either virtual or actual meetings with residents interested in certain topics as we go along, or is that something that's going to come at the end?
No, I would welcome that, actually. And one of the things that we'll be putting together, and I believe we're going to get to this probably in the next meeting, is literally a schedule. So, you know, what issues do we want to tackle first? You know, which meetings are those issues going to be focused on? I mean, like one that we've talked about internally is Reston's population. You know, maybe we should jump right into that. And so maybe that's a couple meetings. You know, maybe it's a meeting and then we take a break and deal with something else and then come back to that. To give time, to think about it and to gather additional information. That's I think going to be, that'll give you an idea, at least the schedule that seems to work best in a process like this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone have any other questions at this point?
Do you happen to know, this is Jan, can you hear me?
Jan, yes.
Hi, okay, because my video isn't working, I guess. When will we know the results of the census, which would give us a very good idea of the rest of population?
Wow, that's a great question. Anybody know that?
Under traditional law, they were supposed to have the census results out by the end of the year. However, there are requests that it be, into early next year. However, the administration is asking for that to be moved back as much as 6 months, so middle of next year. So it's unclear when we'll see what.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And it's a good point. That may be a good example of an issue. Let's say we work through issues around Reston's population early in this process. And let's say, by, I don't know, July, we have at least a tentative consensus approach. But if this task force, say, wraps up in February, March, April next year, well, when the census numbers come out, maybe that's an appropriate time, to come back and review that. Actually, the way these processes normally would work is we would work through each of these issues one at a time, and then once we get towards the end, staff will help pull them all together, and we would have really a couple of opportunities at least to review that, make sure that it actually fits together. Because sometimes you look at an issue in isolation And then once it rolls up into the larger vision or the larger plan, it doesn't really look as good anymore. It doesn't seem like what we thought it would be. So this could be an example of even with the census numbers not out until maybe early next year, it would give us an opportunity. We would have an opportunity to come back and fix that.
Hey, Walt, this is Mark. When you talk about the population, there's really kind of two different numbers. One's the theoretical population based on the PRC zoning district calculations that are, a creature of the zoning ordinance versus the actual population as measured by the census. And maybe when staff presents some of the background on the population, they could talk a little bit more in detail about those theoretical populations versus how it relates to the census, because it's really apples and oranges in many respects.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mark. Yeah, I think when we get into the population issues, that's one of the issues we're going to need to address, as well as over time. At what point might we need to say review this comprehensive plan? What is the ultimate? What is the population of Reston based on the plan? I mean, that's a really basic question. I don't think any of us have a good handle on. So, yeah, I think there are going to be a number of related issues. I see some other hands up. Let's go to them. Reston Bell. Reston, go ahead.
Yeah, I think actually Mark just kind of weighed in on what I was going to ask about is, when we're talking about population, how we're defining it, if we're just looking at numbers or if we're looking more closely and considering the historical kind of context of Reston and what it was intended to kind of reflect in terms of diversity. So I was kind of going to ask the same thing, like how we're defining population and what our goals in this group are to achieve that process. Yeah, and I think the good news, or maybe it's not good news, is I think there's a lot of flexibility in how population gets defined. And my interest would be that it just is thought through and that it actually has some meaning to it that everybody can understand. A couple more hands are up. Charles Colby.
Hey, Walter, I was just wondering, we're talking about the population, if it's possible that the county somewhere has data that's not the census, but that does delineate the population, so we don't have to wait for the census.
Yes, absolutely. Does anybody on the county side want to address that?
Yes, St. Clair Williams, and yes, we do have staff that regularly works with various types of data or population, not just census data. So yes, we will be working with groups to compile that information as we move forward.
Yeah, and sometimes a non-census source is more accurate than the census itself.
Yeah, I worry about that for this year, especially census during a pandemic.
Yeah, you have it every year, every decade.
Yeah. Burton has his hand up.
Yes, hi. I was just thinking I'm probably the least well-qualified person participating, but to me, I'm not sure it makes sense to work on the population first. Maybe it'd be easier to conclude what the population would be once we go through the other issues and talk about accommodate that have to do with how to accommodate the population. Just a thought.
Thank you, Burton. Now that gives us something to think about. I think let's use that comment to segue into the elements, at least that are the starting point. And again, this is not the finishing point for this task force, but this provides us, I would say, some fodder upon which we would develop the list of topics to be addressed through the schedule and also the schedule itself. So Burton, keep that thought in mind. That may make sense to folks. So let me just walk through very quickly what was in the motion I made at the board to initiate this task force and study process. So these are the items that we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at the projected population thresholds for Reston and how to ensure that population, infrastructure, and the environment are all in balance. Land use in the village centers, so the three there, Hunters Woods, South Lakes, and North Point, including clarification of what type of future redevelopment proposals might require an amendment to the comprehensive plan. The adequacy of existing plan language to generate additional affordable housing and improvements to plan language to encourage preservation and enhancement of existing communities that now provide affordable housing. The adequacy of existing and planned pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure for accessing Silver Line stations. The adequacy of existing comprehensive plan guidance to facilitate urban scale mobility and development design in the TSAs while protecting the stability of nearby neighborhoods. Existing comprehensive plan transportation improvements to ensure that they are all aligned, they are aligned with plan development. Three more. How the comprehensive plan could better facilitate enhancement of Reston's natural environment, encourage energy efficiency, and support sustainable green neighborhoods. How the comprehensive plan could address concerns about monopolization of ownership in Reston and ways to encourage diverse ownership and/or management over the long term. And finally, whether the historic practice of promoting privately owned and managed open space sufficiently addresses public needs during the next 50 years of Reston. So there's a lot there, and I know we've got a lot to unpack. I mean, this is why this has taken a year, and we're going to be meeting roughly every other week to talk through these. And I'll just open it up at this point, for any comments on this. Are there things that that maybe are not addressed here that should be? And I'll just open it up for thoughts.
This is Bill Penniman. I can't find the hand raising icon, so excuse my jumping in. A couple of thoughts that I think are important as one looks ahead. One is it's not so much a building issue, but how can we have this development that does occur enhance our community? That's a broad question, but it's how do we bring the new people in to integrate them as part of our community? How do we get amenities in the development that are attractive to those of us who already live here and make it a more desirable form of development? Placemaking in all of these areas of development. What's that going to do that's going to make it more attractive to all of us and make Reston really stand out as the kind of special place that we would all like to do? So I think those are all important. On the population issue, the one thing I worry about that is thinking about that in the abstract, because it's a number, or some people will think of it as just a number. But the reality is that number is not going to materialize for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And the whole world we live in is changing so fast with climate change and everything else. We have to think long term. That's all. It isn't going to happen tomorrow, no matter what we do. And many of us won't still be alive by the time we get anywhere near the ultimate population for the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Other comments, thoughts on this approach? Oh, I see Jason has his hand up.
Hello. Quick question, Walter. You had mentioned earlier on that you wanted to address design. I'm assuming that could take on many different contexts, but just want to make sure that's not lost in these 10 principles, because I don't see it necessarily addressed.
Yeah, it's buried in the transportation bullets, in terms of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and then the facilitation of urban scale mobility. But Jason, I think that's a really good example of something that's not explicit, perhaps should be in this review. And I know there have been a number of folks actually in this meeting have participated in the development of Reston's design guidelines. I think, but I think that's definitely an issue that, at a minimum, is going to cut across many of these discussions and perhaps needs its own discussion specifically.
Yeah, I could see a number of overarching themes kind of sprinkled throughout these 10. So maybe it's worth at some point cataloging that.
Okay, great. And by the way, as everyone's speaking and putting these ideas out, St. Clair, I know you and your team are capturing a lot of these ideas, right? And this is, yeah. So thank you. This is not being lost. I don't have a. I guess I don't have a whiteboard to write.
Yeah, we're taking notes. We're taking notes.
So, thank you. Thank you for your question, Jason. I see Lynn has her hand up. Go ahead.
Make sure I'm unmuting myself. My question is about the last two bullet points here. So the first question is, so your bullet point, how the comprehensive plan could address concerns about monopolization of ownership in Reston. I guess my question is, are we specifically looking at Reston Town Center and Boston Properties?
Potentially, yes. I mean, one question, remember, this comprehensive plan is really a long-term vision, for the community. And typically, this process, a comprehensive plan, does not get involved with who owns, a property, the number of owners, that type of thing. This is a little bit different, but I think, one of the things I've certainly heard a lot of people talk about over the past year or so is the monopolization of ownership in the core of Reston Town Center and some of the challenges that's created for various members of the community. So I think this is not something that the county would be able to do anything or would do anything short term about. But part of the question is there a long-term vision of a more, I would call it, diverse ownership in our major commercial center of Reston Town Center, or is that something that maybe doesn't belong in the comprehensive plan? That's the discussion I look forward to.
Okay, well, I look forward to that discussion. And then my second question, so this pertains to your last bullet point, whether the historic practice of promoting privately owned and managed open space sufficiently addresses public needs during the next 50 years of Reston. Now, I appreciate that this opening of the comprehensive plan does not include the golf courses, but my question is, isn't this bullet point possibly opening that up?
Well, it's really, this task force that will decide what to focus on in this review. It certainly was not my intention, and I let both owners of our two golf courses know that it was not my intention to open up this process for the purpose of changing the designation of the comprehensive plan for those two properties as golf courses. So that was not my intention, but this task force does have the ability to look at really any element in the existing comprehensive plan and review it and see if there do need to be updates or amendments, and using the collective good judgment of this group. And by the way, I have to say, this is a very solid, talented group of folks. Thank you for signing up to do this. But based on the group's good judgment, and that where that goes, or if it goes very far at all, is really up to this group.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Walter, this is John Mooney. I can't find the raise hand function either, so.
Sorry.
Go
ahead, John.
I'd like to mention two concerns that I don't see explicitly called out in your list of 9 points here, and then ask 2 questions. The 2 concerns are, which Reston Association has discussed over the last couple of years, and we've actually, as you know, discussed it with you, is a concern about how all the traffic is going to work for this development over the next, until we're fully built out. And the Reston Network Analysis final report modeled the impact of TSA development on TSA traffic, traffic within the TSAs. It didn't model the impact of that development on non-TSA Reston. And we've talked about it. I just wanted to articulate here tonight and put that on the whiteboard as a concern. The second thing is, to accommodate all the new Restonians brought about by this development, or brought into Reston by this development, we're going to need adequate infrastructure, including large public playfields and open spaces. And this is implicit in your one of your final bullets here. But we've often discussed among ourselves whether this problem can be handled on a parcel by parcel development review, or whether it does not require, because the demands for playfields and open spaces are hard to accommodate in every parcel. So is there a way that this task force can work to bring all of the parties, the developers, the landowners, and users together to talk about this issue? The 2 questions are, to what extent, if at all, do you want to include a discussion of Reston Town Center's development, especially, the densities, different densities there? And then the second question is, how are we going to be able to communicate, to work with one another between sessions, whether with county staff, with your office, or among ourselves, so that I'm sure you'll address this toward the end, but this can't simply be every second week. This has to be work in between. So those are my 2 questions.
Those are good questions. The second one's harder than the first, John. But the first one on town center, I think this task force could look at that. But one of the things that I think we need to bring forward is an understanding of what's already in the zoning ordinance for town center. What is the zoning status? And I wouldn't say town center is built out, but in terms of the rezoning activity in Reston Town Center, it's pretty advanced. So once you reach that point, by looking at zoning, you're really not able to go backwards, or to downplan something where the zoning's already been, put into place. So I hesitate, because you're really, if you open up the density, you're really, you're either keeping it the way it is in the plan, or you're increasing it. So I think it's a very helpful exercise to understand what the existing zoning and plan status is for town center. And I think after walking through that, we'll need to think carefully about how far to go, but into that process. But I would consider it something important for the group. If it's important to the group, we should definitely look at it. Does that make sense, John?
I'm thinking about proposals to stretch the densities a bit in the town center. So how we're going to deal with that eventuality.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there are some things in the zoning. There is some flexibility in the existing zoning that could impact, how much development ultimately is built. There are other things that will impact that too as well. But it's a good point, John. And I think we probably do need to peel that onion a little bit. in terms of the ability for this task force to communicate in between, um, frankly, we're in a little bit different situation. Typically, we would have, we would have a little bit more interaction during breaks and before meetings and after meetings, and unfortunately, that is not possible right now. So I think I would first of all encourage those of you to talk amongst yourselves, about these issues. Lisa, do you have any ideas? I mean, or Sarah, could we? I think that's something we can look at, but there might be a way to do some of this electronically, in terms of sharing information, in terms of posting information that could be useful to the task force and others.
Absolutely. There's lots of opportunities to share that information, but let's think about that and the easiest way for people to participate. And if DPD is the one with the experience with this, if you all have ideas.
I remember the last pandemic, how we did it. And,
Exactly.
I think that there are opportunities to maybe create some topical chat rooms, or maybe some virtual discussions in between meetings, if people are interested in particular topics, or staff has information to share. We could maybe organize some conversations around items like that. But yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's one that we should be thinking about and trying to figure out how to best get people plugged in and communicating. Obviously, I agree with the supervisor. It starts among the task force members, and obviously you can reach out to county staff, but maybe there's some things that we can do that are a little bit more intentional to advance the conversation.
Just a question, a legal question. Is the task force subject to the Sunshine Laws and the Freedom of Information Act? Because that would affect our ability to have those conversations.
Yeah, this is a subtlety. I'll just say that at this point, and it's a little bit in flux because we're in literally a state of emergency, and the governor has declared that at this point the task force is an advisory body to the Hunter Mill District Supervisor. So it really that interpretation may evolve, but and we'll have to keep an eye on that. But at this point, I would say I would still encourage you to have conversations amongst yourselves, and and let's look for opportunities to do the chat rooms, to obviously anything that is a say subcommittee of this task force would need to be open, but in terms of informal conversations, I would encourage those.
May I jump in with a request, please, Walter? This is Tammy.
Yes, and after you, Tammy, we're going to go back to Michelle because she has had her hand up for about 10 minutes.
Hey, let her go first.
Okay. All right, Michelle, sorry. I've been watching your little hand there. But
That's okay. I figured out how to use it.
Okay, good.
I wonder if, given the current circumstances, if another goal is not in order. You have 9 here now, but should there also be one on public health specifically? In the current plan, health is weaved in through parts, but there's not, as far as I can tell, an exact section just on public health. And I think this might be a good opportunity to consider that, and as far as it affects our entire lives here in Reston, from buildings and encouraging healthy buildings, to transportation and outdoors.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I think I've heard a couple of suggestions of topics that are not either not mentioned or not explicit in that. And, you know, that's one I think we could consider as another one. So thank you.
I'm just afraid that if we get into too many things, that it's going to muddy the waters. I mean, the focus should be on the rest of master plan and what we can do with those items that you mentioned. I think if we, that suggestion was wonderful, but I think that should be a separate task force.
Yeah. Thank you, Jan. And what I think we're going to do after this meeting is we'll come back at the next meeting with a draft schedule, list of topics to review, and a schedule. And I think at that point, then we can talk through what we want to include and what we don't. So I encourage everybody to keep identifying anything that you think maybe needs to be added, and then we can have that discussion in a couple weeks. Michelle, did you have anything else?
No, that was it for me. I do think that this would be incredibly important topic.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Tammy, thanks for passing.
Thank you. I would love to have an email list of the members and alternates. I have some information on green neighborhoods and their elements that I would love to get to everybody before we have those discussions, so that people understand everything that's required in the complexity of green neighborhoods, so that when we actually plan, we get to that goal. So can we have an email list of the members, please?
Yeah, I think one way or another we can make sure that task force members have a way to communicate with everybody else. So yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to do that, Tammy. One thing I would note, the task force, there is a chance we may there may be one or two additions to the task force. It is very close to being set in stone, but I just want to throw that out. If a new person or two pop up, in a couple weeks, don't be terribly shocked. I've already had it pointed out to me a couple of times, some major deficiencies in our membership. So I think we're extremely close, but we may not be completely there. St. Clair, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add in response to Michelle's question, while there's not a bullet on public health, we do have staff from the health department that is a part of this team, and they are working in several of the areas that they will be a component of this process. In fact, we have Anna Rickman from the health department. She's one of the staff that's in the attendees section, who is observing this meeting tonight. So that is something that is, staff is looking at that concern as part of this process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, St. Clair. Now, let me just check and see if anybody else has their hand up. We're getting close we have about 18 more minutes. I'm going to take a couple more hands up that I see, and then I'm going to move into seeing if any attendees want to ask any questions or make any comments. Jason, I see you have your hand up.
Just a quick point to follow up on being able to contact or sending out materials. People, my preference, and I think this would be helpful for everyone, if we could filter that perhaps through your office. I mean, people want to send things, but if there's common materials being sent to everyone, I think it'd be helpful to have that filtered and potentially even storing it on like a Dropbox site, so there is full access if it's not through email. Just a quick suggestion.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't. I appreciate that, because I know, different people have different situations and preferences in terms of information like that. So thank you for flagging that. Reston.
Yes, I like Jason's point. I think that's great. So we can have equal access and people can kind of dive into things as they're able. And along with the list of things that might be shared, one of the thoughts that's coming to mind as we are moving forward with Reston is I think it's really important that people have a clear sense of what the history of this space is as a planned community and what that means and what that looked like so that we can keep that in mind as we are developing Reston, because it's what brought people here initially. And part of what makes it so beautiful is all the green space we have. So we want to make sure that we're intentional and not just kind of thinking forward, but also keeping our history and the roots of Reston kind of in our, in the forefront of our brains, so to speak, not so much in the back. So I don't know if there's if there's really good material that your office has access to on the history and kind of some of Robert E. Simon's initial kind of thoughts as he was planning Reston out. And it might be helpful just for people who are not as familiar with original Reston to understand what it is that we're developing.
Wow, it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I was going to say, some of the best resources are aging out, or they passed away, unfortunately, in recent years. So, but I know there are resources. I know a number of folks, actually some of them on this call, have can be a resource along those lines. But Reston, we'll take that into consideration and think about that a little bit and see what we can bring forward. Because you're right. I mean, for me personally, one of the things that I find exciting about this process is how to build on what we have right now. How to not ignore it, not crush it, but how do we take the good things and make them even better? And I know Reston is a place that it's attracted a lot of us over the years, and we moved here for specific reasons. And I personally, I hope that we're going to continue that and build on it. Thank you. Let me just check and see if there are any other hands up that I missed. Okay, then let's do this. It's 8:45. Let's spend the last few minutes before we close to see if there are questions from attendees. And it looks like we have 42 attendees right now. And Lisa, do you want to help marshal us through this?
Sure. For the attendees, if you have a question, we have a question now from Catherine Baum. But if anyone else wants to raise their hand, we'll take them in the order that they raise their hand. And Catherine, I'm going to unmute you in a moment. You'll hear 2 beeps and then you can start talking.
All right, Kathy.
Hey, Supervisor Alcorn, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
So I have a couple of comments. I spent last evening with several young people who should have graduated, did graduate, etc. They are looking to move to Reston, and I'm curious about how we are going to work. They're going to move into the TSA. They're young people. They're going to have great jobs. I'm curious about how we are going to involve them in the Reston community because they're TSA people. My next question or comment is I am very concerned about the redundancy between the Reston Association, the Parks Authority, and the Reston Community Center, and how this task force is going to deal with the pandemic changes that we have Google and we have Amazon, and we're going to have a lot of other businesses say you're not going back to work till 2021.
Yeah, those are some serious questions, Kathy. Yeah, thank you for bringing those in. I think a couple of those are things that, frankly, this task force might be able to work into the process at some level. Some of them are I would say, even bigger challenges. I know one of the things that I committed to do, and I haven't done it yet, and I should just, accept that some of these things we're going to need to do virtually. But I would like to bring some of those parties together that you mentioned, the RA, the Park Authority, and RCC, to really sit down and have a serious discussion about going forward, and how do we build on the best of those organizations and the strengths of those organizations in order to make the community better and make it more cohesive. So I'd share a lot of the, I guess, the concerns about the issues that you raised, Kathy. So thank you.
Okay, Catherine, we're going to ask you to, if you could unraise your hand or take down your hand, whatever we're calling that. Thank you. And our next attendee who has a question is Mark Malcolm.
Hi, Mark.
Good to join you this evening. One of the things that was, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that you said very early on, need to re-emphasize it. We've moved beyond the Reston Master Plan to what is in the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan. And with that, there's something that I'm seeing very much with the structure of the task force at present that started with one of the slides with St. Clair, that he spoke to the Reston TSA. There are 3 TSAs in the comprehensive plan. There's also a significant area that I don't see well represented by the task force at present, which is dealing with the Herndon TSA and the Woodland Park Great Oak District that is part of this comprehensive plan. As such, you're missing an opportunity to make it fully address things that impact Reston coming from the west side. In addition to that, one of the observations that I see when we had the 10th goal being public health, it's a little bit more, it's really all the people aspects of the public infrastructure. That it's not, one of the things that seemed to be a weakness to me from 2015 through the 2018 update was addressing the schools was not well done with the comprehensive plan before, because of the way school board does its planning factors have been different from what was done with the county planning. These are observations.
Thank you. I think your comments are well taken, and I think worthy of consideration. I know you've done a lot for your community, and are one of the people that really have paid attention to what's going on around Herndon Monroe. So thank you.
I'm a member of the Reston Association just as much, and yes, I have read just as much as I guess Jennifer has of the comprehensive plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Lisa, do we have any other attendees with their hands up?
No, we have no more questions from the attendees.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you, attendees, for watching this and for asking a couple of questions there. I did want to go back and see if, upon reflection, any of our task force members or alternates wanted to make any, ask any final questions or make any last comments before we close tonight's meeting.
I had a thought, Walter. John Carter.
Oh, John, yes, please.
Going back to the beginning a little bit, and then I'll do a forward-looking thing. This notion of what is planning, and we have, and this is a Virginia way things are done. So the plan is the vision. The zoning rules, setback, etc. Many places have something about timing of those things, which we don't have specific timing. We don't have an adequate public facilities ordinance. But my point, and I have trouble on the planning commission and with land use attorneys about this. And so this is my thought, that the lines between those items are getting more blurred. And I'll use as an example, the comp plan. The comp plan is a vision and it is a guide, except when it's not. And that's my addition to the way things could be done in Virginia. And examples of that would be in the comp plan, when you put down a road, that's pretty close to a law or at least a rule. Our comp plans, we have the PRC, which looks to the comp plan a bit. So when the zoning ordinance looks to the plan, the plan becomes a little bit more than just a guide. That, oh, well, we're having a nice time doing a guide. My point in all this is what we're doing is really important. And just because we think that it's a guide, that doesn't mean, well, it doesn't really matter what we're doing. And I guess what I'm after is we should stretch a little bit in what we're thinking about. There will be time to smooth out the rough edges if we have any, but we can stretch a little bit. And this notion of public health that I think Michelle brought up, design and the green neighborhoods, I would suggest we stretch a bit in those items and maybe some other ones as well. So I'm very optimistic about this. I think we should think of plans as being very important. So those are my 2 cents in this. So again, plans are a guide, except when they're not, which zoning ordinance says, look to the plan for the recommendations.
Thank you, John. Yeah, very well said. Appreciate that. We do have one more task force member that actually has arrived. Dennis, you want to introduce yourself, say hi to everybody? I know it's right at the end of the meeting, but please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is Dennis Hayes. I've been in Reston off and on since 1979. President of the Citizens Association, also worked with the Reston Runners and the Friends of the Library. And since I was off camera the whole time, I could enjoy the carry-out meal I got from one of our fine restaurants here in town. And I encourage everybody to help support our restaurants. Thank you, Walter, for sending out that comprehensive list that Gary and Lynn put together. Anyway, but thank you for this. I'm looking forward to participating with this group. As you said, it's a lot of knowledge and experience here, and I think we can do something that is going to be significant. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dennis. And I see Gary has his hand up.
I just kind of want to follow on what John said, an earlier commenter. You know, this is so important. At the same time, we need to keep it kind of realistic because of the changed world, not just out of the COVID-19, but even before that. So many people are doing so many different things because changes in technology and other things, that the plan needs to be the best plan we can make it by being realistic to the economic and budget constraints we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That I appreciate that. That I think is a good note on which to end. We will be sending out an agenda for the next meeting, and one of the main things we're going to do at the next meeting is talk through again those topics that this group is going to address, and also look at the schedule. And St. Clair, is there anything else major that comes to your mind immediately that we're going to need to be thinking about for next meeting?
No, I think you pointed out the main things.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody for participating in this process. I'm very optimistic that by working through all these issues, we're going to come out with a good result, and have some recommendations to go into the comprehensive plan that'll make a difference. And I appreciate everybody's spending time. This is kind of a crazy time, but spending time during this crazy time to work on this. So thanks everybody. If you have questions, comments, feel free to contact my office. Jose's been pretty quiet, but he is a resource, not just for me, but for you as well. And then, of course, DPD staff, thank you very much for all the work that you've done to pull this together. Thanks to DIT, and also thank you, Lisa, for helping make all this happen. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn, and it's 8:59. So it's a good start to this task force. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.